ago, and probably looking about 20, 25 years ago, in pubs you used to have the tabletop arcades, which you could sit round, put your drinks on, and albeit it wasn't a touch screen, it was a joystick and etc. etc. It was the same type of principle, and it wasn't so far-fetched a leap of tech to suggest that in the future it would be a touch screen. So to me, it wasn't an innovative project anyway. And then it went by the wayside.
Existed for a long time. I mean, I think it was Xerox back in the 80s, which had the. I'm not sure I'm not sure multi-touch was back then available, but the touch screen goes back to the 80s. So we're talking almost 30 years ago. And when Apple brings you those phones, you can touch the screens and you can do that. And people are all very amazed, just because perhaps in the 90s or 2000 and something, you didn't have these things in the market. But all these companies do is they take very old stuff from research laboratories. Things, the Surface was available in all kinds of, in Barcelona research laboratories. People work with all kinds of paradigms and try to explore how to maybe find some commercial potential for these things, which obviously there isn't, because you see the Surface and you see what happens when you bring the stuff out. Nobody buys them. So these things have always existed. What Microsoft can do is put lots of, maybe even billions of dollars behind it and try to mass produce these things, which they never could do, so it's still very expensive, and also try to market it to the public, to explain to them, you need this table, you need this huge thing. And again, it doesn't work, and this is perhaps the reason it never really came out of the labs, never actually came to market as they call it.
I mean, the touch technology itself, I think it was about 1986, maybe it was even earlier than that, I had at home a light pen from my ZX Spectrum. And that was exactly the same principle. It was very, very primitive, but of course the technology at the time wasn't at the state we are now. But it worked off exactly the same principle. Touch a pen on any television set. It didn't have to be a special TV. Mm-hmm. And I had I think it was called the light pen, and I had touch capabilities when I was young and in the 80s. So it's really something that then disappeared and then came back in later on.
Nintendo has been very, very successful when it comes to bringing back the idea of, like, I don't know, not gyroscopes, but generally bringing back the idea of using 3D interactions and objects which move in 3D for you to interact with something on the screen. But this, again, wasn't so new, because I can recall myself as a kid, like 14 years old, watching on TV the 3D mice. I'm not sure if you can remember, and maybe you haven't seen these, but the 3D mice were very widespread as a kind of the next technology. The future thing would be a 3D mouse, and you'd see people like throwing things with a mouse, moving them in 3 directions, and up, down, and all the directions, 3 axes rather, and basically just disappeared. So you never actually saw. I mean, I used to use a 2D mouse, or it moves on a surface. And that's fine, because I don't see the reason lifting my hand. I'll probably get tired if I did that for many hours, trying to move things in 3D, and besides, working with 2D screens. And conceivably, even 3D screens have existed for a while, what's kind of a pseudo 3D screens, where you have the notion of, like, trying to see into with extra depth. But again, TVs in 3D and computers in 3D, well, we cannot really see in 3D. We have stereo vision. We have 2 eyes, and our brain is developed in such a way that we can do stereo vision and estimate distances. But there isn't really any reason. It's just a gimmick, really. And as long as we have 2D, of course, when you have 2D displays, then the notion of having 3D interaction devices is kind of funny.
Sort of on a prediction scale, if we say in a very general sense that the touch technology was in the 80s and now that's coming into life now, as it were, in the mainstream, you're looking in the 90s, there was something which sort of died a death. We hear very little about it, but probably spurred on by the movie Lawnmower Man, and that's the virtual reality concept where you immerse yourself in the game. Yeah. Now we're seeing 3D TVs now. Yeah. So maybe it skips, 20 odd years. Maybe it skips 20 years before the tech comes into play. The 80s is now coming to fruition now, and now we've got the VR coming in sort of from the 90s. So
do you remember the show Beyond 2000? Have you ever watched it? I think it was Australian. Beyond 2000.
No, I don't think I recall that show.
They used to have this really nice thing. My vision back then of the future, and perhaps with any platform. Obviously, we need to try and focus more on software. But the the things they would show you would be like glasses where you have a small screen or a small, very small retina-like display that allows you to watch TV as you walk around and do things in your life. And that was almost 20 years ago, and this was possible back then. And also you had the virtual reality sort of headsets, which is still very expensive because not many people would buy these things, and also 3D cameras, which I have access to now, are very expensive because not many people would buy them. You don't really want to take photographs of people and just basically get a surface in 3D you can rotate around. You probably just want the intensities and see the complexion of the skins and things like that. So you have all these technologies, but it doesn't mean you would actually want to put them on the market and make the full potential out of them. And sometimes you have companies like Apple, which manage to make people think I really need to be able to touch the screen to do things. Of course, this is one of the things when iPhone came out, I just lots of phones don't really support me touching the screen. It's like if I go to a Symbian device, they don't usually support that. You actually have to go around buttons and things like that. But with my Palm, I've been able to do this since like the late 90s or something. You know, everything was touch screens. You can touch things, you can open applications, you can kind of rotate and move your fingers in all sorts of ways to do stuff. So this wasn't new, but people thought it was new because it was Apple and because of the way they market this stuff. It's important for Linux maybe to, Linux is obviously just a kernel, but for all kinds of platforms, and increasingly Ubuntu is trying to do that, it's important to show that you offer something that's, exciting and nobody else has it, and you kind of invented it. Even though you don't invent that, you just take something from the shelf and you get it to work. One of the reasons Ubuntu is trying to create Unity now, and this I had confirmed just a few days ago, I unsuspected that, is because they need a finger kind of device, a finger-enabled device for Ubuntu to be transferred onto all kinds of touchscreens and things. So they need all kinds of big buttons and things which can work without you having to do mousing. Trying to move towards Android, towards becoming something that can replace Android or replicate the success of that, which I very much doubt they can do if they move from the desktop downwards. And by the way, go to Google, put in Linux in the search box, and see what comes up first. It's very interesting. I was just showing this last night. It's quite fascinating.
Ubuntu.
Yeah. I'm not sure how long it's been like that, but I think it used to be Linux.org before, and it's not even the Linux Foundation. It's like a bit of a form of Google bombing. Lots of people write about Linux and they actually link to Ubuntu, and this is the new, and this is also one of the reasons people occasionally complain we don't find many Linux news anymore, and people don't talk about Linux, and the thing to tell them, and look at Android, look how many huge sites you have about Android, lots of visitors, millions of visitors in there. They just don't use the L word. They don't even use the L word anywhere. It doesn't exist there. It's not Linux, it's Android, and that's it.
And I think as well now, it's not. This isn't something that's we're needing now to speak to people to say, oh, have you tried open source software? Have you tried Linux? Because it's already being tried. Yeah, true, they might not know that they're using it, but I think this is one of the things now that we're seeing why is rather difficult. We're using so many packages now that are tried and tested and respected that it would be very dull to report on a new version of one of the latest version of one of the pieces of software we use, because it'd be like writing a review on Microsoft Windows or on Word or something like that. It's packages that people know what they are. There's no surprises. I mean, I've seen in the last couple of months, certainly, people on desktop, even if they're running a Windows desktop, they're using open source software, albeit they don't know, but they're using open source software and saying, I'm not paying for this proprietary piece of software anymore. What's the alternative? Which obviously is a good thing. And I think things like Firefox are things to thank for that type of attitude, where people discover that you don't need to start digging into your wallet, and that cash doesn't equal good software. And they're getting involved in the open source section as well. Some people have found new hobbies out of it and contributing code, and it's a fantastic setup, a fantastic community. And I think I certainly, looking into the future, we've always said, or a lot of people do say every year, it's the year of the Linux desktop. I certainly think it's the year of open source software, I think it's fair to say. Where people, and you just need to look on any marketplace look on the Android marketplace, look on the web to see how many projects and how many people are actually contributing to things for no other reason but to put it out to others and let them develop and improve it themselves. So it's all good news. However, can I just make a very quick section here because I wanted to make a complaint.